Greetings, I'm Tracy Butler, and I'd like to present the NITAE framework, Neurobiologically Informed Trauma Aware Education. Before the pandemic, I spent 30 years in oncology, starting as a radiation therapist, advancing through patient care, systems training, high end medical equipment sales, and opening new cancer centers. I kept repeating patterns I couldn't explain. I knew something was wrong, I simply didn't know what. When I demonstrated the reality of implicit bias at my undergraduate capstone, I embarked on a journey that led me to NITAE. NITAE is not a new program. It is the interpretive layer of multi-tiered support system built for school systems. It exists to do two things: interrupt the school to prison pipeline and permanently change the neurobiological trajectory of children who are too young to speak for themselves. This is phase one. North Carolina spends slightly over $12,000 per child per year to educate them, and more than 100,000, sometimes as much as 150,000 per year to incarcerate them in juvenile detention. That is not a funding problem, that is a eroding problem. 67% of youth in the juvenile justice system have an undiagnosed neurodevelopmental condition, while 100% have been impacted by at least one traumatic experience. The root cause is neurobiological. Dr. Alan Shore's research on right amygdala hyperactivation tells us that a child exposed to chronic stress is operating from a survival first neurological architecture. That child is not choosing dysregulation. The architecture is chosen for them. Dr. Jeremy Wolf's research on attentional guidance explains why the child cannot simply be told to focus. Their salient system has been recalibrated by trauma to prioritize threat detection above all else. What looks like defiance is a survival optimized attention system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Earlier this year, Pan and colleagues published in JAMA Psychiatry on the identification of three neurologically distinct ADHD biotypes, each with different brain regions affected, neurotransmitter profiles, and behavioral trajectories. Also, Gang and colleagues identified two neurologically distinct ASD biotypes. This is not a classification refinement. It is proof that what appears to be a single behavioral presentation in a classroom is actually several distinct neurobiological conditions that require different responses. MTSS has no mechanism to make that distinction. That is the structural gap NITAE's Tier 2 specialist layer is designed to close. When that child dysregulates in a classroom, MTSS captures the behavioral outfit. It has no mechanism to interpret the neurobiological origin. So identical behavior receives different labels. ADHD or ASD for some children, conduct disorders for others. And those others are disproportionately Black, brown, and low income. This misrouting is not an accident. It is a structural failure. NITAE will fix the pipe rather than merely patch the leak. NITAE utilizes targeted universalism to set universal goals while tailoring pathways for specific groups. Disparity data shows significant differences in diagnoses among racial groups. 24.4% of white youth, 34.4% of Black youth, and 43.3% of Hispanic youth receive conduct disorder diagnoses, while Black kids are 69% less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD despite similar symptoms. NITAE's biotype identification removes racial bias in diagnoses, ensuring accurate identification for Black and brown students and providing neurobiological support for kids in poverty. This approach benefits all stakeholders, including educators and caregivers, by offering accessible resources and reducing diagnostic burdens. The logic model makes clear that NITAE is a system, not a program. Every input is load bearing. Remove trained two specialists and the biotype identification fails. Remove the data infrastructure and the KPI dashboard is inoperative. Remove the coalition funding architecture and none of it launches. If any input is missing, the model fails, and we have designed it accordingly. Activities transform those inputs into action. Structured teacher observations feed into specialist led biotype assessments, which generate referral pathways, which produce the outcome data that justifies both the K through 5 pilot and then the secondary expansion. Short term outcomes include improved Tier 2 identification accuracy and declining suspension rates for students who have been misrouted. The long term impact is measurable. We close diagnostic disparities by race and socioeconomic status, interrupt the school to prison pipeline in its structural origin, and export the model first to secondary schools and then to global MTSS equivalent systems that share this same architectural gap. Implementation spans 30 months across three phases of this first part of NITAE. Phase one is the foundation. Months 1 through 6, we hire a neuropsychological coordinator and two school liaisons, execute university MOUs, and deploy the first workforce training cohort, along with begin family literacy pilots in 3 schools. All of this happens before a single child is screened. We build the infrastructure before we use it. Phase two is a pilot, months 7 through 18. Biotype differentiated screening goes live in 5 K-5 schools. The KPI dashboard is operational and generating real time flags. Quarterly biotype cohort data flows to district leadership. Caregiver engagement is measured against our 65% target. Phase three is scale, months 19 through 30. We expand to the full district K-5 cohort, publish year one outcome data, build a statewide coalition briefing for policy precedent, and begin international adaptation conversations with places like Australia and Scotland, both of which operate MTSS equivalent frameworks with the same missing interpretive layer. NITAE's funding architecture is designed as a coalition model spanning 5 source categories: state IDEA formula funding, NC-based private foundations, healthcare system community benefit partners, criminal justice reform funders, and university research partnerships. This structure was deliberately designed to reduce dependency on federal appropriations, which remain structurally volatile in this current environment. Operationalizing this model requires 2 prerequisite steps: nonprofit formation to establish grant eligibility, and targeted coalition development to build the funder relationships required for a successful pilot launch. Both are near term implementation priorities preceding any formal funding solicitation. Superintendents act as primary change agents, holding the budget authority to advance NITAE from proposal to pilot, while school boards and state entities serve as policy levers. The implementation ecosystem includes teachers' unions, university partners, families, and community organizations. Resistance is anticipated with pre-built responses from various scenarios. The Family Neurobiological Literacy Program addresses caregivers' concerns with accessible neuroscience, parent panels, and workshops, eliminating shame and blame. Teachers worried about workload are reassured that NITAE's observation protocols replace, not add to, existing referral checklists, with union briefings ensuring no added workload. Administrators should note that NITAE is not an additional layer on MTSS, but the necessary diagnostic foundation it lacked. And lastly, the coalition funding structure is designed to remain stable despite fluctuations in federal funding. The project faces significant risks, including high-rated federal funding collapse and diagnostic scope creep. To mitigate these, teachers only observe while licensed neuropsychological consultants interpret data under strict IRB protocols. Medium risks, such as teacher resistance and data privacy, are active strategies, including an annual equity audit for accountability. If racial disparities arise, protocols are suspended for review. NITAE's ethical leadership is based on 5 principles emphasizing data integrity: child-centered decision-making, transparency, functional accountability, and global humility. Every decision prioritizes a child's neurobiological reality over budget and political concerns. NITAE is evaluated against 3 standards: equity and impact, feasibility and efficiency, sustainability, and replicability. On equity and impact, by year one, 80% of students flagged at tier 2 should be accurately identified. By year 2, the racial diagnostic disparity gap should be reduced by 40%, and suspension rates for biotype flag students should be down 35%. By year 3, the student pipeline to juvenile justice should be down at least by 50%. On feasibility, 100% of teachers complete the observation protocol training in year 1. Caregiver engagement in the literacy program reaches 65% by year 1. Coalition funding secured reaches 70% of the 6.3 million target by year 1. On sustainability, the question is whether district level self-sufficiency is demonstrated by year 3, and whether the pilot data is sufficient to justify both secondary expansion and statewide policy briefing. That data is a bridge to phase 5. The neuroscience is settled. Shore's right brain development research, Wolf's attentional guidance framework, Pan's ADHD biotype heterogeneity, Gang's ASD biotype distinction. The science has been telling us what to do since the late 1990s. NITAE is the infrastructure that finally lets us do it. The brain is not born. It is built by experience, by relationship, and by the adults who either respond to its distress signals or don't. Every child who gets rooted into disciplinary pipeline instead of a neurobiological support system is a construction project abandoned mid-build. We are not saving money by doing that. We are investing downstream in recidivism, in broken families, in communities that never recover, and in human suffering. The path forward requires 4 concrete actions: secure coalition funding across the 5 identified source categories, formalize a superintendent cohort across 5 pilot districts, complete the family neurobiological literacy curriculum for community review, and establish research partnerships with Triangle area universities to anchor independent program evaluation. Phase 5 of the NITAE framework extends this architecture into middle and high school, where for many children, the most consequential derailment is still ahead. The science has been available. We have it. We're not using it to protect children who don't yet have the neural pathways or the vocabulary to do it alone. I thank you for your time today, and I welcome any questions.